Okay, I think we'll get going. Sorry for the delay, folks. So you're all very welcome here to this joint hustings event, advance of general election, held by Friends of the Earth Ireland, CATU Ireland and the IPSC. So fair play to everyone for making it out on a cold Tuesday evening, and a big thank you to all the candidates who have come today. I know it's so close to the end of the campaign, it's really important to be out on doors, so we really appreciate you taking your time to come and speak on these three issues. I guess I'll give a little bit of context as to why we kind of link these three issues together, and then I'll hand it over. So I'm Aaron from Friends of the Earth, and I suppose at the moment, as we're facing into the 2024 general election, we're facing kind of multiple interlinked crises at home and abroad. On the domestic front, we're facing the deepest housing crisis since the foundation of the state. There's record numbers of homelessness and record high rents. On the international stage, we're looking at over a year of the genocide in Gaza and the complicity of the global north. Meanwhile, for the climate, which is kind of our remit, the hottest year on record has been surpassed year on year, and as the recent COP in Azerbaijan shows, there's been a failure by the more developed world to deliver a fair deal for those who are least responsible for the ecological crisis and refusing to pay their way. While these main issues seem like disparate issues, we brought them together to highlight the connection between them. For example, the housing crisis is not only a crisis of accessibility and affordability, but also of low quality. Due to a lack of affordable alternatives, those on low incomes, particularly tenants, are forced to live in cold, leaky homes and are therefore at greater risk of energy poverty, meaning they have to heat their homes with unhealthy, polluting fossil fuels. This is bad for the environment, it's bad for public health, and it's bad for the cost of living. The depth and scale of the housing crisis meant that any attempt to force landlords to address this, to give greater rights to tenants, such as minimum energy standards, or enforce things like a no-fault eviction ban, is met with cries that landlords will flee the market. The lack of housing has also given ample ground to the growth of anti-migrant, conspiratorial, climate denier politics, at precisely the moment where we will see more people fleeing war and climate disaster worldwide. On another point, some of the largest energy users in Ireland are data centres, currently using over 20% of the grid capacity, with a projection of over 30% by 2030. An increasing number of these are aiming to be free of the grid altogether, mostly using fossil fuel power generation. So contrary to some popular perceptions, these aren't just for sending videos on WhatsApp. The most energy-intensive operations they engage in include artificial intelligence training and metadata processing. Companies such as Amazon and Google, which are deeply implicated in the Gaza genocide and ecocide through providing the cloud platform for Israeli occupation forces under Project Nimbus, are operating and building data centres at an unprecedented scale in Ireland. Similarly, the Irish state is facilitating dual-use goods exchange with Israel directly, including data storage. And a crucial question we need to ask ourselves as we face into these elections is energy for who? Why are we letting international corporations complicit in genocide use up the same amount of energy as the entirety of rural Ireland while people struggle to keep their own homes? Everywhere we look, we see the connections, from Airbnb eating up rental supply in large parts of Ireland, while simultaneously advertising properties in illegal settlements in the occupied Palestinian territories, to the immense carbon emissions and ecological destruction required for Israel to wage its genocidal war. We see the roots of these interlocking crises in colonialism, capitalism, and extractivism. So lastly, I'd like to highlight the international links of the organisations who have helped pull this together. From the IPSC's steadfast support for the Palestinian people in general, to CATU's affiliation with the Palestinian Popular Struggle Coordination Committee, and our colleagues and Friends of the Earth International in the Palestinian Environmental NGO Network, Eoghan, many of whom have actually sadly been murdered in the last year. So I think all groups here that have helped organise this realise the struggle is an international one, and we don't see these as separate issues. So we want to make sure that the parties that are present here today answer what they will do to resolve these issues. So there'll be a space for contributions from each organisation on the floor. And I hope that the responses and the lack of appearance by others help people to make up their minds on polling day, and also to assist in holding any of these candidates' parties into account if they do form part of the next government. So I'm going to pass over to our chair for the evening, Ailbhe Smith. Ailbhe, I suppose, needs no introduction, but long-time socialist, feminist, organiser, activist, involved in numerous campaigns from repeal to feminist ongoing work at the minute. So Ailbhe, I'll let you take over for the rest of the evening.
I'm not sure. I think we're going to have to pass the mic around, are we? This isn't working.
Is the switch on it there?
I know you should use a switch on, but I don't know whether
it's working now.
It's on now, is it? Okay, thank you. Let me know if you can't hear me. You can hear me, can you?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, hello everybody, and sorry that we're starting a little bit late, but we will absolutely be moving through this extremely smartly because we have people here who are canvassing and who are very, very busy and very, very committed. And there's also the leaders' debate if anybody's interested in that later on. So I'll be keeping people to time, and that's my main function this evening. First of all, I want to say a big thank you to Friends of the Earth, to CATU and to IPSC for bringing this hustings together, because I do think it is really extremely important. These are the three, for everybody here, I think really these are the bottom line, fundamental, critical issues. These are the emergency issues which that, nationally and globally absolutely have to be tackled and dealt with. And that's what we're here for today, to hear what candidates and party representatives will be having to say about them. So the format for the evening is, first of all, I'm going to ask each of our four people here to introduce themselves and to set their priorities. We hope that Eoghan O'Brien will be joining us at some point. So each of the candidates then, our political party representatives, will very briefly, 2 minutes, introduce themselves, and after that we're going to look at each one of these three issues in turn. So a member of the relevant organisation, whether it's FOE or IPSC or CATU, will ask the table 2 questions, and they'll have 2 minutes in which to answer each question. Now they're big questions, they're big issues, so we'll see how good they are at being succinct and being able to resume the key ideas with energy and conviction, which I have no doubt they will do. But I will be keeping them to time, so when you hear a loud bellow or a rap or a ring from the phone, that's me, and they'll have to stop, and if they don't, you have to tell them to stop, okay? So that's your role for the evening. But after that, I do hope that we will have time for, in fact I'm going to make sure that we have time for some questions and answers then from the candidates. This, I think, is being streamed or FaceTimed or one of those kind of things, okay? So there are millions listening to us here this evening. But I do want to say a big thank you. You know, fundamentally, whatever party you're in, as long as it's way over my direction, I actually have a great admiration for people who put themselves up for political office. I truly, really do, because I think it's a hard thing to do. And I think the last 2 days of the campaign must be an absolute nightmare. So very glad that you're here this evening. So I'm going to just go around the table that way. Clare Daly, Councillor Paddy Monahan for the Soc Dems. Oh, Clare, you're Independents for Change. Councillor Paddy Monahan, Michelle Hall, Councillor Michelle Hall, who's here for the Labour Party, and Eoghan O'Brien, who's here for People Before Profit. So I'm going to ask each of you in turn just to tell us briefly about yourself and your priorities. Clare, we'll start off with yourself this time.
Sure. Well, I'm here out of respect for the three organisations who've organised the event, and the fact that coincidentally they're three of the key issues that I've highlighted in my campaign, along with the cost of living and the defence of our neutrality. I am a 40 years an activist. I have been a students' union leader, a trade union activist, a community activist in the campaigns against water charges and bin charges. I've been 25 years as a public rep at national, local and European level, and I suppose the approach I bring to every position is that I see it as a platform to organise from rather than an end in itself, to highlight the issues and concerns that affect people most and to encourage and give people confidence to wage those struggles. So that's the approach I take into this election with all others. It's an incredibly diverse constituency here, a lot of different people, a lot of different issues, a lot of different socio-economic and national backgrounds, and I think it's a great cross-section of life in Ireland now with many challenges. So that will be the approach I'll be taking into it this time as well. So.
Thanks very much, Clare. Councillor Paddy Monahan.
Thanks very much. So I'm here to represent the Social Democrats, and so to give a general overview of what we're for, so you all know, we have 5 sort of red line issues. If we're going to go into government, these are the things that essentially we won't negotiate on. These are necessities for us to go into government. Number 1, a lot of these are very relevant to what we're talking about today. Number 1 is building 50,000 affordable purchase homes. Number 2 is implementation of sláinte care. Number 3 is a plan to reach our climate targets and avoid 8 billion in fines. Number 4 is a full cabinet minister for disability, and number 5 is high quality public childcare. So I think a lot of that's relevant to what we're talking about today. So me personally, I got involved in politics just campaigning around education and discrimination, religious discrimination in particular in education, and trying to eradicate that. Still a battle. I'm a primary school teacher and a couple of kids, so it's personal. I suppose one of our red line issues as a party being disability, it's always interesting how points tie into other points. Like for example, the education point about discrimination. Every politician, I was a dad, I'm only a councillor for 6 months, so I was talking to politicians since 2015 as a dad going, can we change these laws? Basically Catholic first laws, baptism barrier laws, religious influence in education generally speaking, they should be separate. And I got a whole lot of yeses and nods and the words inclusion, and it was all very touchy-feely. But time after time after time, when it came to actually votes in the Dáil, I realised, oh, the stuff they say when they meet you is not the stuff they do when they vote. And I think that's highly relevant to what we'll be talking about today. Disability is my other big issue. My mother was a wheelchair user, and in terms of things like transport, active travel, in terms of actually a city that works and accessibility, again, it's easy to have fine words, but it's so hard to get stuff done. And we've got a city clogged with cars, clogged with private cars, and if we can't get it right out on our own doorstep, how are we going to get the big issues right? Because it's so easy to commit to these things in words, but to actually do something is harder. I'll talk about that more later. Disabilities, accessible housing, retrofitting houses expensively rather than building right the first time round. So again, yet another issue that's relevant. As we all know, these issues tie into one another. We don't take them all in siloed ways, so I guess that's how we'll be coming across in the talk today as well. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Paddy. Councillor Michelle Hall, Labour.
I heard you all this evening. I'm a Labour councillor in Drogheda. I think Drogheda is a microcosm of really a lot of the issues that are happening across Ireland. I've been a Labour councillor since 2019. I was an SNA for 12 years in schools and in various types of schools. And I now work in a DEIS band 1 school, so a disadvantaged school. In the last 5 years in Drogheda, we have seen our social deprivation widen by 5 points. So in some of the areas in Drogheda, we have people that are living under minus 31 points on the social deprivation scale. So if you look at the latest Hubble figures on 2022, that is a huge impact on children that I teach in my area. And one of the issues I'm constantly dealing with is homelessness and eviction bans. And where are we going to find places for people, because there's nowhere to rent in Drogheda. Even though we are building up to 5,000 homes, we're probably the one area in Drogheda where we actually, or in Ireland, where we actually are building a lot of homes. We opened a new road through local authority loans, and we are now able to build those homes, but they're not affordable for many people, so they aren't. We need to build more social housing. Only last week I have a family with 6 children, and they're going into a homeless hub in 2 rooms. First night they're in 1 room, second night they're in 2 rooms, and it's really difficult for them. And then on the other end of it, I do also have the landlords ringing me going, you know, you're advocating for these people, but you know that maybe there's antisocial behaviour. But all I am concerned at the end of the day is that we keep children out of homelessness. Homelessness for children has risen by 76% since the Housing for All. It hasn't worked. We really do need to build so many social homes, and that is part of the Labour Party's manifesto. As a local councillor in Drogheda, and I'm in Drogheda Rural, I live in a community that we just didn't have any public infrastructure. We've no footpaths, we've no buses, we've no playgrounds. So today, after 5 years, we opened our first playground in Termfeckin. I'm so proud that I worked on behalf of people in the community, and you've no idea the impact those little things make on people. Having footpaths and safe walking to school and shops is so important. Your local government really is a microcosm of everything that happens in the national policy, and the Labour Party have a very extensive 126-page manifesto that, you know, encompasses so much of all the things that we need going forward as a community to make sure that Ireland, this rich country, actually feels and looks and accommodates people in such a way that, you know, the GDP or the GDP figures just don't seem to add up. So.
Thanks very much, Michelle. Eoghan.
Yeah, thanks very much. Yeah, delighted to be here. I suppose I agree with the introduction that these issues that we're going to be talking about today are fundamentally linked. Kind of one of the things that politicised me was the bombing of Gaza in 2014, and I remember getting involved in protests around that. After that, getting involved in housing campaigns and anti-racist campaigns and environmental campaigns, and I joined People Before Profit because they were active in all of that. And so within that, then I'm also a member of CATU, stood with members as well to oppose evictions. Have campaigned with People Before Profit around conditions in inner city flats around damp and rats and so on. And I've been part of the Climate Justice Coalition within that, pushing for kind of trade union to link the trade unions in with the climate movement, and working with small farmers as well within that. And I think the key thing coming into this election, from our point of view in People Before Profit, is that we have a historic opportunity for the first time to have a government without Fianna Fáil or Fine Gael. They've been ruling for 100 years. They came into this election thinking they were going to walk this election. They were eyeing up potential coalition partners, and the more they go and talk to people, the more they expose themselves and they drop in the polls. And so there's a real chance, I think, now of a left government for the first time. But the problem is, I think, that People Before Profit are the only party who are willing to say we will not go into coalition with Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael. So what we're saying to people is, give us your number one vote, to send the strongest message possible that you don't want Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael in government, and then transfer left after that. I think the reason we say this is, and I'll just, in relation, there's lots of reasons, but I'll speak to the issues that we're talking about today. It will not be possible to get proper action on Palestine with the people who are in hoc with NATO, who are trying to get us into NATO, who are letting the US military through Shannon Airport, who visited Netanyahu when, like for example, Micheál Martin, when Israel's genocidal campaign had begun. It will not be possible to get the change we need in coalition with the parties who invited in the vulture funds, who've privatized, in the process of privatising social housing, who ended an eviction ban that they brought in temporarily during COVID. It will not be possible when it comes to climate action to get the kind of change we need with the people who have Michael O'Leary's speaking at their meetings, and who are basically making policies for the likes of Larry Goodman and billionaires in the agri corporation. So what we're saying is we need a left government, and there is a real possibility of it, and so we want to push the other parties on the left away from coalition with Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael. And we can talk about the policy side of things now, I'm sure we'll get into all of that now, we can get into more detail, but that's the kind of key message we're trying to set out.
Thanks very much, Eoghan. And I should actually say that I know invitations were issued to the range of political parties, and the people who you have here in front of you responded, and others did not. So there we go. I am now going to call on whoever is going to put the two questions to our candidates and representatives for CATU. Is that yourself? Yeah. Okay, do you want to stand up maybe, just so everybody will hear you? Is everybody hearing okay?
Yeah.
Good.
Great. Yeah, no, thank you.
By the way, sorry, I'm going to start off the other end now, and we'll start off with Eoghan and work our way around. And you each have a couple of minutes then. You've been very good so far. So a couple of minutes each to respond.
Sorry, I'm just getting some feedback on the stream that the sound's quiet, but the mics are working now. So 1, 2. That might be better for people who are watching on the stream. That's okay.
Great. Yeah, thank you everybody. Jack here from CATU. I suppose for the past 3 years, CATU, as all Ireland's only all-Ireland tenants union, has been campaigning. One of our national campaigns is on public housing, and we've been organising in public housing blocks across the island. I suppose, and as part of the calls in the election, we're calling for universally accessible, culturally appropriate and decent quality public housing, which would also replace, for the for-profit emergency accommodation and asylum seeker accommodation. Do you support this position? Would be the question.
Okay, so we begin with Daly.
Yeah, absolutely. People Before Profit supports this, and it's kind of our headline housing policy is that we have the money now with the Apple tax to do what we want to do is to set up a national construction company. That money would get the ball rolling on that to build social housing and social and affordable housing on public land, And so, I think that is key, really. I think we need to break from the kind of market-driven policies that we've had, the dependence on developers, and who are basically making a profit off this. So if you were to do this, if you set up a national construction company, hire builders, on decent wages, decent pensions, which is another thing the state doesn't want to do, but if you were to do that, you could build on the kind of scale that we need. You would also be able to, bring back people who've emigrated back and so on. Obviously, the culturally appropriate side of things, the way, you mentioned as well the treatment of asylum seekers, I think has been an absolute disgrace by this government. And so what we're saying is we need housing for all, we have the capacity for it. There's obviously other things in our housing policy like the derelict houses and so on, but we can, you asked specifically about that, so I maybe just leave it there for now. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Owen. Michelle.
Thanks. Yeah, obviously housing is one of the burning issues. I have 3 adult children myself living at home. When I was 21, I was living in a shared accommodation with my friends, and I had a box room for €50 a month. Can you imagine that today? And it was a lovely house. It was a really nice house. And it's just so beyond the dreams of what we can deliver for our young people today. So the Labour Party, that is one of our headline manifesto, we will build 50,000 homes per year. We will build in all the recommendations from the Housing Commission. We will retrofit 50,000 houses per year as well. We will bring home the diaspora, and we have a huge deficiency where we need to build and upgrade our housing stock. We need to make it attractive for people to come into apprenticeships. We need to pay them more money. We need to have cultural appropriate accommodation for our travellers. My father was a travelling housing officer in County Louth, so he was. And when they were offered houses with gardens at the front, they were saying to him, we don't know what to do with that. We don't want that. We want Tarmacadam. And nowadays, I think Kildare County Council built fabulous culturally appropriate traveller accommodation for people. We need to actually recognise the ethnicity of people and what they actually need and listen to them and not impose our views on them. And we also need to have the 6 IP centres up and running. I live in Termfeckin, and we had an emergency direct accommodation centre open, and there was a lot of pressure from the far right not to have it opened, and I was targeted myself by the far right because I supported people in the direct accommodation centres. So we really do need to combat that far right, and I think all of us here today, I think we all know where we stand on that. We also need to be looking at their vacant homes. So we've 160,000 vacant homes in Ireland. I live in Drogheda, as I say, huge dereliction and vacancy here. We need to impose the taxes, and we need to ensure that the Labour Party, for example, want to impose a vacant home tax and a minimum of 3,000, and this will be collected by revenue, and derelict tax as well. So we really want to encourage people. We want to give local authorities the powers, the CPO powers, to take over properties. We want to look at CSO, compulsory sale orders that they used in Scotland as well, for derelict properties, and putting in all the strategies that the Housing Commission have actually done. So our policies are evidence-based and they're people-centred.
Thank you. Paddy.
Thanks very much. So I suppose our manifesto has various statistics and numbers, and I won't go into too much detail on these, read them yourselves, but we intend on building 75,000 affordable homes in 5 years and 70,000 social homes, using state-owned land, using compulsory purchase orders, providing early stage finance for not-for-profits, changing zoning so that we can have affordable housing, special zoning for affordable housing. On a personal, as I said, I'm a councillor 6 months, and on a personal level, everything I noticed, my area is called Donamead, but it's everything from Raheny up to Belmain, Clongriffin, if you know North Dublin. And it's funny, whether you're in the big old areas of Raheny or anywhere up to the brand new developments in Belmain, Clongriffin, the housing crisis is affecting everyone. In those big old houses, what's happening is you've got people in their 20s and 30s with qualifications, with skills, living in their childhood bedrooms. And then up in Belmain, Clongriffin, you've got brand new builds that are being sold off the plans to international investment funds. You've got, I remember in school the the land league, you had the fair rent and fixed the tenure. So you've people paying extremely high rents for virtually no security month to month, and that's in one particular area. That's in the Donaghmede area. Speaking as a teacher, there isn't a teaching crisis. There isn't a shortage crisis nationally. There's a crisis in Dublin. Outside Dublin, depending on cities, it can affect other cities in Ireland. But outside Dublin, rural areas, there's no crisis. There's massive demand among teachers for a few jobs. Dublin is where there's a massive teacher shortage, and the reason for that is, again, this is not some magical problem in Dublin. It's what we've been talking about from the start. Policy affects other areas. Education policy is being affected by housing policy, because primary school teachers, there's around the staff room table, there's this generation gap now, because teachers aren't living in Dublin anymore. They're doing their Droichead year and they're heading off to Australia or the Middle East, and they're saving their money, and they're extremely lucky they might be able to move back to rural Ireland, because teachers can't afford to live in Dublin. That's where the need for affordable housing kicks in. Oh, excuse me, sorry. I went on a bit. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Eoghan. Just firstly, CATU will be delighted to hear that in our canvassing out in Ballybock, the residents in the flats there said the only time that things got done there was a result of the direct action by CATU, that up to that they had no attention from the council, and that's what delivered the change. Now, I'm not going to talk about what the problems are. You all know what they are. You're at the coalface of them. But I think it is important to say that the crisis is not accidental. It is a direct consequence of abdicating our state role in the provision of housing. Financialisation of housing is not confined to Ireland. It's a European phenomenon now, where 30% of housing stock is owned by private vulture funds, another 16% by investment funds. We have that in Ireland on steroids. The rise in rents over the past 10 years, which have more than doubled, exactly correlates to the introduction of the REITs, the Real Estate Investment Trust, which the government told us we're going to clean up the rental market, make everything great. It didn't. It meant that these players entered the market, created a cartel, drove the prices up, and that a huge percentage of the construction now is being built to rent, with the result that only 6% of the housing construction stock that came on supply last year in Dublin was available for people to buy. So it's all absolutely linked to that situation, and we have to remove the middleman. But instead, what they're doing with this land development agency is now a part two. It's exactly what it is. It is abdicated and gifting state land to private developers who are not necessarily individuals. Generally, they're global capital funds who just want to make money. They're gifting that land to sell us unaffordable housing. And unless we break that model, we're condemned to repeat that. So there are no shortcuts out of it. But the good news is, it's not that hard. We did it before. And you don't need a construction company, you don't need magic. The local authorities did that before, and that doesn't mean that they directly have to employ people. They did what they always did. The county council drew up the plan, they offered the tender to a builder. The builder was happy with a certain percentage from that, but not the big chunks that they're getting now. It costs 200,000 construction costs excluding land to build a house in this city, 20,000 for services. So why is an affordable house 350,000? Because the financial hawk in the middle of it is hiving off 100 grand. And in the big apartments that nobody can ever buy, they can jump ship. So we need to tackle all this. I do support CATU's demands. I very much support the idea of an eviction ban, rent freeze, and all of the other measures which are absolutely necessary. 100% stamp duty on bulk sales and all the rest of it. But this will not be delivered without action. It's a fundamental change that's required from the policies of Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, and I am opposed to going into government with Fianna Fáil or Fine Gael, and I've been very open about that. But also it's a warning to small parties who would prop them up that you can't change the monster.
Okay, thank you very much, all of you. I know you have your second question, Jack.
We do.
Sorry.
Who's going to?
Yes,
Hi, I'm Katerina. I'm a member of CATU Rathmines, Renal and Harold's Cross. Our branch is currently supporting tenants who are facing mass eviction in Rathmines at the Tramco building. So these evictions would only add to over 20,000 evictions that have taken place over the past year. So our question today is, do you commit to a permanent ban on no-fault evictions?
Okay, so we'll start with Michelle this time.
Yeah, that's very easy to answer. Yes, it's part of our policy, so it is no fault evictions. It's just, and we want to freeze on increasing rent prices as well. It's as I say, as a local councillor, so I've been a local councillor 6 years, this is what we do a lot in our work. It's dealing with families who have been given eviction notices, and it's trying to ring around the estate agents, trying to look and see is there anywhere to rent. It's working through the pathways, through the local authority, and
that sense of buy-in. When people don't feel that sense of, it's harder to feel part of the community. It's harder to feel that there is a sense of community there, because people need security. People need to feel secure where they live, and I think a massive step in that is no fault evictions. Again, like, I didn't mention this in relation to the last question, but there's nothing worse as a teacher when you're doing something and you have to tread so carefully on so many issues, rightly, when you're talking to stuff about kids, because they're from a huge variety of backgrounds, and where you have a kid who, you know, they're talking about their home, and it's, you know, it's the Holiday Inn, and they're talking about what it's like living in the Holiday Inn, and you're just there nodding along because they're 6 or 7 years old, and you don't question that, but it's disgusting that children are being forced to be raised in those circumstances, and no child should be growing up in insecurity and uncertainty. They should feel safe in their homes, and I think a ban on no-fault evictions, bringing in a ban on no-fault evictions is a fundamental step in that. Thanks.
Thanks, Paddy. Clare?
Absolutely, easy one, all right. Absolutely support no-fault evictions. Totally support the idea of a rent freeze. I know people are talking about that for 3 years. That can't be permanent. There would have to be a review after that. We need to monitor this situation really carefully. I mean, evictions are the biggest cause of homelessness. We know now the official figures are 15,000. The reality is it's very much more than that, with people couch surfing or out staying or welcome their parents' homes and all the very rest of it. We know there are 2,900 asylum seekers without any decent permanent accommodation at all, not even temporary accommodation, out on the street. So all of these things are absolutely linked, there's no question about it, and we need to get a hold on these REITs who have a stranglehold in a lot of sense on the private rental market. This idea of constructing houses for these people to rent to Airbnb that no one will ever own, and they pay no taxes. They give the money to their shareholders, they pay no taxes. They have a stranglehold and an enormous, I think they own about, well, a very large, I can't remember the figure, a very large amount of the rental market. We know as well that approved housing bodies also own huge chunks of the market as well, and are a concern to have, because there's a scheme launched by Oakley today, cost rental €1,200. That's not affordable. We gifted the developer in O'Devany Gardens 14 acres. We paid 10 billion for the services in that site, and affordable houses are 350 to 450,000, and rent, as you know, is hitting off £2,000. So we need to again get back to that private stranglehold in the provision of our housing, and therefore the state needs to build social and affordable housing. We need to revamp the local authorities to be able to do that as they did before, and that's the only way of living. In my opinion, everybody should be entitled to apply for public housing. If you earn more, you should pay more in your rent. It should be completely integrated. It shouldn't be segregated. We shouldn't have these income limits at all. That's the best way forward on that. Public housing in the Netherlands, 32%. Austria, Denmark, 20%. We're completely on the wrong track. We're even worse than Europe, which is getting worse as well. But I think those short-term measures in terms of the rental market would be a very big assist in the situation, but it's only scratching the surface, to be honest about it. Owen?
Thanks, yeah, look, like everybody else, the short answer is, yeah, we're for a plan on no-fault evictions. It's been something we've been for a long time. I just add in a few extra things, I suppose, seeing as I didn't before. So yeah, we had a bill in the Dáil for just in terms of rents, for rent reductions a couple of years ago, with a capped rents at 25% of income. Obviously, it was voted down by the government. The argument the government gives around that is that then like Micheál Martin has this thing about landlords will flee the market, and apparently he thinks that houses will disappear with them. But we know that the houses are going to still be there, and so our answer to that is, if the landlord wants to sell, then the state should buy the house back, and then you have more public housing in the stock. We need to ban on vulture funds, and then in terms of tackling dereliction and vacancy and so on, it's, particularly in the inner city here, it's a massive issue. And the council does have the power to compulsory purchase properties, but it's not being used enough. And then even when it is being done, for example, there's a near east site, and I don't know if people were ever in the Barricade Inn, it used to be a squat, but and they had cultural events and all that kind of thing. Then they were evicted, it's empty for years, and then the council does the right, actually in this case does the right thing, buys it back, but then puts it out to tender again. So then it's going to be, you know, privatised once again. So like this is obviously not the way that we want to do things. We want public housing. And just finally on back on the safe construction company. The reason for the safe construction company is to be able to build at scale. The argument the government will give us is that, you know, we need developers to be able to build at scale and so on. But the problem, as Clare outlined, is that they are taking massive profits, and that inflates the price of the house massively. But it's not actually the developer or the investor who's building the house, it's construction workers, and they're the people that we need, and we need to employ them basically to do that on decent wages and decent pensions. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Owen. You know, a many layered problem, but when you think about the damage which is done to so many people because of this appalling house building, but also rental situation, I mean, it just makes, it makes the blood boil, actually, every single day when you hear about it. But it's great, you know, just to listening to all of you. I'm not supposed to be intervening, but I can't just comment.
Only a matter of time.
But really, you know, that it can be done, that this is actually not some kind of major rocket science. It can actually be done, and we know who we have to elect to do it. So I can't say more than that at the moment. I have to go to the next area, which is another crucial, critical area close to all our hearts and our lives and so on, which is environment and climate. So can I ask the Friends of the Earth interrogator to stand up there? Thank you.
Hello, Clare O'Connor from Friends of the Earth. It's actually, it's to do with climate, but it's also to do with housing. So we're obviously in these really like interlinked crises: climate, cost of living, and housing. If you guys get elected, how will you keep climate at the top of the agenda while facing into these other issues like housing and cost of living? Because if you look at current government policies, they've committed to introducing minimum energy performance standards in the private rental sector from 2025. That's fallen lower and lower on the political agenda over the last number of years, despite it being government policy. So I'm wondering, what will you guys do to actually make sure that minimum energy efficiency standards in the private rental sector are implemented if you get elected? Because as we've seen, the private rental sector homes are some of the worst quality housing that we have. People on the lowest income are most likely to be in the least efficient housing as well. So it's a really important policy. But how will you fight back against the argument, again, that landlords will leave the market? That's what we've found as we've been advocating in this area, that certain political parties are pushing back, saying, oh no, we can't actually implement these standards now because landlords leave the market, people get evicted. So it's really complex when you're trying to get climate policy in, but you also have these other crises. So how will you actually make that happen? My second one is on social housing.
Just that one, and then we'll come back to you for the second one. And we're going to start with Michelle, but just before we do that, I'd like to welcome Janice Boylan. Janice, thank you very much, and I know that you're stepping in at the last minute for Owen O'Brien because there's a scheduling problem there. So thanks very much for coming along at such short notice. And we will not pass to you after Michelle. We'll give you time to get your breath, okay?
I think it's Paddy's turn, but I'll take it.
Oh, was it Paddy's turn? Was it? Oh, I'm so sorry.
Was it? No,
We've forgotten the question now at this stage.
Okay, so the question was about the social or private housing and how we're going to retrofit in them as well and keep the standards up. So the Labour Party do have that in their manifesto, and if I can find it, but I didn't read it earlier on, but part of it is that so if we are looking to retrofit, we will only allow retrofitting for landlords who will secure a 5-year lease for tenants. I think that's really important, that we can't look at retrofitting and then allow them to sell the house really quickly afterwards. They also have to prove that if they're going to refurbish a property, that property has to be of a substandard, and you can't evict anybody unless it really absolutely needs to be refurbished. So we're going to provide an obligation to declare that rental property complies with regulations and a right of information for tenants on any refurbishment or renovation that led to an eviction or rent increase. And for HAP tenancies, we're going to allow applications for the warmer home scheme on condition of a minimum 5-year lease, as I say, with clawback clauses. And then we want minimum standards as well. And, you know, even just from again, it's a local authority where we really see, you know, all these national issues, they all just come down to your local government, and we discuss them then at our council meetings. And it's really hard sometimes for the local authorities who have to go in, and you have a load of mould growing in private rental accommodation, and then if they push that landlord to refurbish what the landlord has been doing, before we had rental bans, freeze on evictions, was that they could evict that renter and re-rent it again, like, you know. So it is a very difficult thing to do, but we are absolutely committed to introducing an NCT style system of certification to ensure minimum standards are met in the private rental and social housing accommodation, and increasing inspectors as well as part of it, but it is quite extensive. It's on page 13 of our manifesto.
Okay.
You're going to
We'll carry on with Paddy, and my apologies for getting the order mixed up. Paddy, have you got the question in your head?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I think like it's kind of a problem in Irish politics is to have things on paper and not actually impose them. So I think that's a priority across the board and in housing. I know that, for example, again, you'll see in our manifesto, we want to expand and enhance grants for retrofitting. We want to, in terms of solar panels, we're talking about 500 solar panels in 500,000 homes, making free to low-income households. I think at a broader level, at the larger level, there's things like the climate action plan that we have to reach international targets so that we avoid 8 billion in fines. But the reason I tend to look at these things at a very, very, very local level. As I said, if we can't get it right locally, then I'm far too used to seeing big ideas on paper and nothing being followed through on. So that's where the imposing of standards in housing is so important. Personally, in terms of, I mentioned disabilities earlier, I mentioned active travel earlier. I've been on the council for 6 months, and I've pushed whatever, we get about roughly 10 odd questions every month to put in. And I'd say a good half of mine relate to active travel, relate to roads, and the pushback, the constant pushback that I get from parties who, and people in the authorities who they talk a great game on very, very high level issues, but the difficulty getting an accessible cycle path, the difficulty getting any kind of movement on getting, the total dependence on private transport in Dublin city centre means that we've got footpaths clogged with cars. In terms of the environment and ecology in the area, we're so dependent on private transport. Cars parked on grass verges, cars parked on trees, embedding the roots of those trees, damaging trees, and I've repeatedly raised questions. And if this sounds like a granular issue, it's because, as I said, we can't get it right at the local level. I've raised the idea of, I don't understand, for example, why we have flashing orange lights for pedestrians. I don't understand that, because no driver seems to understand that. It's a way of hurrying people up, getting them to run across the road so that we keep the movement of cars. Virtually every question that I put through to Dublin City Council gets the same response: traffic flow. Until we move away from the idea that traffic flow is the be-all and end-all, well, then we're going to get what we have out here. I think it's relevant to the question because we're great on paper, we're not great in practice.
Okay, thanks, Paddy. Clare.
Okay. Briefly, I think how do you keep that issue on the agenda is probably no different than how you keep any other environmental issue on the agenda. We're dealing with corporate vested interests at the helm, and really people organising and agitating is the only way ultimately this will be addressed, because it is a question of political will. It's not a question of economic resources. You know that the quality of life and the environmental impact of these necessary measures in terms of minimum energy efficiency. Italy has been able to do a massive program of stage works of completing all of this retrofitting, which has transformed the situation. It might be of interest to you to know that there is €1 billion sitting there in unclaimed EU money by Ireland. Monies they got for the COVID recovery and Repower EU. We got very little and we claimed practically nothing. That money is going to run out in 2026, supposedly. There's not a single proposal gone in for that €1 billion, which could be used for that. So it is political will, and the only way you can address that, and it comes back to the point I made at the start, for me, the only thing a politician can do is you say, vote for me and I'll do this for you. I don't really buy that, but what I've always said is, you know, we need to struggle with people. People change things, and all a politician can do is use that platform to bring the information, to shine a light on how we could do this and encourage people to organise to achieve it. And that's the solution, I think, because it's definitely not financial.
Okay, back over to Owen now, and to finish this round, and then we'll come to yourself, Janice.
Yeah. Okay, well, just very quickly, right? Yeah, we need obviously to have you know, certification for housing, and actually, you know, make sure that standards are kept high. And I mean, I said it before in the previous answer, but the question of landlords leaving the market, I don't care. The state should buy the house back. Do you know what I mean? It's not. We don't actually need. The idea that was put out by Gael and Fianna Fáil in particular, that we need a class of landlords to, you know, provide housing, is just not true. Like, the houses are built by construction workers, they exist, and then they don't go away. And the only thing that keeps them off the market is allowing you know, people to basically hoard land and hoard property, which I think we should oppose on just on a basic level. So yeah, then the other things around, apart from having minimum standards, so like retrofitting, in our budget this year, we've put an additional $1 billion towards retrofitting of homes. But I think in the we should also, after that, be moving to a system where basically we should have, rather than the system now where we have grants where you have to put up 10 or 20 grand yourself and you get the, people should be given the entire cost of the grant up front, and then they can pay back the difference in their energy, because they see a fall in their energy bills, and over time they can, you know, they can pay that back. There should be a different, their energy bill should come down, but they should be paying, you know, a bit more than it actually costs to pay back to the corporate, and that it becomes, you know, cost effective over time then. And then there's just maybe just can I make one more point? Or?
Very quickly.
Okay, well, it's going to take too long, I think. I'll maybe fit it next time.
I go just a little bit on the retrofit. So I'm obviously reading off of our manifesto here because I literally got called to this meeting at the last minute. So I'm unprepared, as I was out canvassing when I got the call. So apologies, but just to let you know that we obviously, Sinn Féin obviously have a Pharaoh retrofit plan, and there's 34 recommendations in that plan. But the one that sticks out to me the most, and I think the one that has to be spoken about tonight, is that we want people who are in need of retrofitting and can't actually afford it. We want them to be looked after, because they are the ones that are in the coldest homes, and they are the ones that can't afford to get it done. So we're looking at that across, that's what we're looking to do. And obviously we have Darren O'Rourke is our environmental spokesperson, and he has come out very strongly and said that he welcomed the publication of the report that was done by the Irish Green Building Council and Friends of the Earth, which echoes our plan. So that's in line with our plan. So just to say that just as well.
Okay.
All right,
thanks very much, Janice. That's great. And we're going to now, I'm just thinking to myself though, I mean, it's not just about retrofitting, and I presume that was also not everybody has really addressed the fact that we definitely need to ensure that the construction of new housing is properly supervised in such a way as to ensure that in fact there is a maximisation of efficiency in regard to heating and so on. So, but that is really very, very key. We're talking about 50,000, 75,000 blah, blah, blah homes being built, and who's going to supervise, who's supervising them? Would you mind telling me? Anyway, we'll move on, and we have your second question coming up. Oh, you're asking the second question, and this time we will begin with you, Paddy. You see, I thought I was being very clever and starting, then got lost in the middle. All right, so go ahead there.
Hi, my name's Cueva Flynn. I'm with
Sorry,
Friends of
I
the Earth.
can't hear you very well. Maybe you need the microphone.
Any better?
Yes, perfect.
So I'm Cueva Flynn. I'm with Friends of the Earth. So my question's on data centres. And as was mentioned already, data centres are currently using 20% of our energy grid in Ireland, and that's more than all urban households in the country. It's also well over the European average of 2%. That's over 20% versus 2%. And not only is this putting significant strain on our energy grid, also worryingly, we currently export €1 billion in dual-use goods to Israel, and the majority of that is comprised of data storage space. So in light of this, my question to you is, will you commit to a moratorium on data centres and halt this trade with Israel? Thank you.
It's a very clear question. Paddy?
Thanks very much. Sorry, just the second part, and halt the...
Trade with Israel.
Yeah, and again, it's an example of how things, how the topics intertwine with one another. We had a motion in the Dáil recently, specifically on related trade with Israel, and mostly to do with genocide in Gaza, and across the board, we are supportive of just immediately suspending trade with Israel in a wide variety of settings. So I mean, that was us taking the lead, and recently, that was just in November, that was spoken on the Dáil. So that is a Social Democrats policy and priority. Generally speaking, I suppose in terms of data centres, will tie into our climate action plan, which would, as I said, the plan is we have to reach international targets by 2030, and we want to avoid 8 billion in fines. We want to invest, just looking at the manifesto here, we want to invest 5 billion in sort of an energy revolution, including 200 million in research and development. So I suppose at a very high level, there are very high level goals. Personally, I think that what's visible locally is of huge importance, but I think I've made that clear already, and I'm a massive advocate for everybody taking the hit and everybody seeing the change in front of them. So I very much see it as a local level as well. I see the importance of leading on this from, I suppose, a Dublin City Council level in terms of active travel and transport. Thanks.
Okay, thanks very much, Paddy. Clare, yourself?
Very briefly, I absolutely support a moratorium. I was actually one of the first people, probably the first person to raise the whole issue of data centres when I was in the Dáil all those years ago, because we exactly identified what was coming on this, the strain in terms of the energy, the very little returns for Ireland at all in terms of employment or anything like that. They really have absolutely nothing to offer. I've been in favour actually of getting rid of a few of the ones who are here as well, not to mind just a moratorium on the ones that we have. But I do think the other aspect of that raised the whole issue of what are they doing, and the whole lack of transparency and accountability around that is something that hasn't got the same level of focus and really needs to be addressed, because this is incredibly sinister. We know the power of data, we know the role particularly of Israel in terms of that globally as well, so it does cross over to the other topic as well. We need to be and as the very least we should be demanding full accountability and transparency for everything that is going on in them, and if there are unacceptable behaviour on there, which I could pretty much bet there probably is, then they should be turfed out anyway, because we get precious little. They cost us more than they contribute as far as I'm concerned.
Okay, thanks. Over to Eoghan.
Yeah, we are, of course, for a moratorium, and Brady Smith will be one of the people who brought motions around this to the Dáil, obviously voted down by the government. When this government took power, I think they were consuming 12% of all electricity, and now they're consuming 21% of all electricity, and they're on course to, by 2030, consume 30% of all electricity, which is completely unsustainable. The other thing I think which is just worth pointing out is that around the emissions, we cannot meet our emission targets if we continue with the kind of proliferation of data centres. They're going to basically use up all of the new renewable energy that we're using. And I think if you drill into some of the 2023 figures on emission reductions, there's a clever trick being played by the government here, to make it look as though they're reducing emissions more than they are. They say that emissions have fallen by 7.3% in 2023, but in actual fact, there was a 12-fold increase in imported electricity from the UK, and so that doesn't get counted in our emission reduction. So, apart from that, and so now the SEAI are saying that we need to. So all of our targets have been basically missed repeatedly since the term this government began, and now they're saying that we need cuts of 11% in beginning in 2025 to actually meet the targets that we need, and it's just absolutely not sustainable. Joe, the other point is a point on Israel. Yeah, we're for a total ban on all trade with Israel, and so obviously that would be included with that. And we were, we brought in motions around this over the years, and obviously they've been voted down by the government as well. And yeah, I mean, just finally, I just want to repeat, we will not be able to achieve the kind of change that we want in coalition with Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael. I think we've seen it repeatedly missed targets. And then these kind of clever accounting tricks. You could go into the way forestry has been managed, the spruce plantations, and again privatisation of forestry and so on, and trying to bring in vulture funds into forestry again, and again, a Green Party minister. You cannot deal with Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael in this. And so I don't know. People can say all the good stuff they want. The Greens said a lot of good stuff in 2020, and I think. We could go through more of what's actually happened. I just don't think we're going to see the one thing.
Thanks, so Michelle.
Thanks. Yeah, on the data centres, we want to have a register. We want to make sure we have the legislation going through as well. I can't find the exact stuff. I did read it earlier. It's just so much. But I think we have to acknowledge that Friends of the Earth have stated that the Labour Party has the most environmentally friendly policies. That we are the ones that have come out top of by Friends of the Earth, who have assessed our manifestos, and that we have met the criteria that you want to see to make a huge difference. We have committed to renewable energy, 80% renewable energy by 2030. We are happy to go to net zero, but we're actually even happier to speed that up if the IPCC, which is different from the IPSC, wants us to bring those targets forward, because climate change is accelerating at a stage and helping us design our climate policy. So we are hugely committed to our policies on climate change and clean renewable energy, and even the Irish cycling campaign came out and said that the Labour Party again committed so much to active travel measures. I'm a found member of the Drogheda Cycling Group. I would happily cycle every day if I could. Unfortunately, it's just not safe where I live, and that's so important, as you were saying, Paddy.
Okay, Janice.
Thanks. Literally reading off the manifesto here, guys, you'll have to bear with me. So, increased investments. What our priorities include are increased investments in grid expansion and upgrade, enhancing off-grid connectivity, including the development of a national energy storage strategy, investment in energy storage and establishing peer-to-peer energy sharing initiatives, development of a coherent industrial strategy for all renewable technologies, introduce planning conditions that require prospective very high energy users to produce or contribute financially to the production of additional renewable electricity at least equal to their needs at any given time, ending tax relief to data centres, expediting the delivery of a framework for hybrid connections which could let multiple renewable projects join to the grid via one connection, aiding the pace and delivery and lowering the costs.
Okay, thanks very much, Janice. Well, we are now going to move on. I'm keeping us moving very, very quickly along here, but we're going to move on to talk about Palestine now, and we have, I think, questioners there. So if you'd just like to go ahead.
Yeah, Sean Marmion from the Irish Palestine Solidarity Campaign. So over the past year, we've seen virtually...
Just hold a little bit.
Okay. So over the past year, virtually every party has come out vocally in support of the Palestinian people and against Israel's genocide. So I'm not asking for a rundown of what your party feels about the Palestinian freedom struggle, but what you're actually going to do to help end Israel's regime of oppression, apartheid, settler colonialism and genocide. So these are some of the demands of the Palestinian Solidarity Campaign. They're not limited to this, but they are the enactment of the Occupied Territories Bill, the ending of dual-use products to Israel, ending the use of Irish airspace and airports for the transfer of weapons to Israel, including ending the use of the US military in Shannon, and ending diplomatic relations with Israel. Just on the dual use, for people who may not be familiar, we're talking about products that have both civilian and military use. In 2023, Ireland has exported 6.5 times more of these products than in 2022. And most of these came in the last quarter of 2023. 13.5% of our exports to Israel are dual-use products. Now, this information I'm quoting is from the Uplift investigation and also from the bill brought into Shannon by Alice Mary Higgins, Francis Black and Lynn Rowan about ending bringing in an embargo of weapons either directly or indirectly through Irish airspace and airports to Israel. So basically what I'm asking is, what concrete actions are you going to take to help Palestinians win their freedom?
So I'll have to step out for a moment, so I'm just going to return to the original order from me. So I'm going to start with Clare on this one.
Yeah, I mean, look, as far as I'm concerned, this is the biggest test facing humanity. International law is on a knife edge. When I was in the European Parliament, I became internationally recognised as one of the key voices for Palestine, able to call out those in the European Union to their face. And I think if elected to the Dáil, it will be a similar role to play as well, because the truth is that Ireland, despite the rhetoric, and despite you said all of the parties have come out in support of Palestine, but the truth is the actions of the Irish government has made them complicit in that genocide, and the very point spelt that out. In some ways we're no different than Biden. We had to, under pressure from the people and the magnificent solidarity from Irish people, the government recognised the state of Palestine, what, the 141st country to do so, or whatever. We opened diplomatic relations. That's not enough while the type of complicity that you outlined is carrying on. So of course I would support the demands of the IPSC. We absolutely have to impose. Thatcher and Reagan imposed an arms embargo against Israel in the 1982 Lebanon war, and Micheál Martin can't call for an arms embargo now. How the world has absolutely changed. We need an arms embargo. I've been a long-standing opponent of the Americans' use of Shannon for their wars and their facilitation, not just Israel but everywhere else. I've been arrested for that previously. I am glad that Ireland's complicity with the Israeli genocide has highlighted our complicity with American imperialism as well. In that regard, I support very much the idea of the enactment of the Occupied Territories Bill, not just now, but when it was first raised all those very many years ago. And we've seen the interference behind the scenes, how the government, at the behest of both the Israeli establishment in secret phone calls and the American ambassador threatening Micheál Martin, how they've watered down and tried to undermine that bill. So all of those measures need to be taken. I fully support the BDS movement. That's where we need to go. It was ordinary people organised globally, not politicians, who ended South Africa's apartheid, and it will be ordinary people organised again who will deliver justice for Palestine. And I think it's a case of putting it up against politicians. It's very true that the climate is good in Ireland for that, but we need to put concrete actions where the mouths are, and they're out outline there. I mean, you outlined it in your answer kind of, so our job is to say yes, we agree with that, and to continue to speak out and call for absolute these people to be held to account. I'm very proud of my team who were out last night and who used a very kindly donated kneecap jeep to plaster Netanyahu was a war criminal on the Israeli embassy, and to put up Free Gaza, Free Palestine. I think the media ignored the issue because they were afraid it might embarrass their Israeli friends or something, but every action, all of the Mothers Against Genocide, all of the groups, it's ordinary people, and working with them is the only way forward. So.
Absolutely. Where are we at now? Whose turn is it?
He started from that.
Spoken already. The modesty.
Yeah, thanks very much. So, I mean, just to answer the question directly in terms of our policy, I suppose it's set out to a good extent in the motion that we put forward just this month, to immediately suspend all military trade with Israel, to immediately suspend dual-use licences to Israel, immediately suspend the use of Irish airspace and airport for weapon transfers to Israel, immediately impose trade, travel and diplomatic sanctions on Israel. So, like, I remember 2003, I remember going out to Shannon Airport. I wasn't involved directly in politics at all at that stage, but like, there was the Iraq War, and it just struck me, we're complicit, like, we're either in or we're out, like, and the people of Ireland, 100,000 of us or more were on the streets of Dublin a few weeks before that, and we made our feelings clear. It made me realise, wow, governments actually don't necessarily listen to the people. I would say the same about Tony Blair's government. There was 1 million people on the streets of London, and they couldn't have been clearer where they stood, and still Blair just went ahead against them. And this is a left-wing government in England and Britain. So I suppose that's where we stand. My mind is boggled how this issue has gone, because I was in Berlin just a few weeks ago, and I was outside the what was it called, the City Hall on Alexanderplatz, and I took photos because I couldn't believe it. On one side there was Ukrainian flags, because that's the issue to support, and on the other side there was the local Berlin flag, there was the German flag, and there was the Israeli flag, and that was it. And I was going, like, am I living in? Does anyone see this? Do we see what this is? Like, the Israeli flag outside a state building in Germany. I mean, I don't really know. I don't even know where I'm going with that, but I suppose it shows us where we are in the world, and where doublethink has got us, where there's the Ukrainian flags on one side but the Israeli flag on the other, and where, yeah, there's a fear of speaking out. There always is. As I said, look, it's not related, it's not as serious, but religious control of schools is what got me involved in politics in the first place, and I'm a primary teacher, and there's a hell of a lot of people unwilling to speak out on that publicly. I'm constantly contacted by people anonymously on the issue of religious control of schools. It's not as big an issue, I'm not suggesting that for a second, but it is telling the omerta, and people unwilling to follow up on their action. So basically, in short, I've said what the Social Democrats stand for. Thanks.
Thanks, Paddy. Janice.
Yeah, thanks very much. So we remain steadfast in our solidarity with the Palestinian people's determination to achieve their freedom. If in government and when, if we get the chance, we will enact the Occupied Territories Bill as a priority, the illegal Israel settlements, divestment bill and other sanctions against Israel. We'll continue to build on links with Ireland and Palestine and support all international efforts to help establish a free and independent Palestinian state. So also, and as part of the council, my group submitted a motion in October calling on the government to enact the Occupied Territories Bill. Look, they came out, they called the election without enacting that. They very much could have done it, so that just goes to show you what they think of the Palestinian struggle. Sinn Féin have always been there and will remain to continue to always be there with the Palestinian people. Thank you.
Thanks. Michelle.
Thanks for your question. Yes, we fully support that. We also want to expel the Israeli ambassador. I think it's, you know, education is so important around this issue as well. So I have here the printed version, and I went through, you can see all my highlighted things, and this is Francesca Albany's latest report. So it is, and what I did was I went through the whole report and I put it, synopsized it, and put it up on my own social media. So I want people to be really, really aware, not to turn their heads and not be aware of what's going on. So nobody's going to, not many mainstream people anyway, are going to read this whole report. but when I synopsise it on Instagram, you can't really ignore what is happening. And the Labour Party have obviously supported Palestine and their right to be a nation, and the right, the BDS movement, and also the Occupied Territories Bill, and Brendan Hallin's spoken it in Dáil. In 2019, we had Francis Black in Louth County Council, my fellow councillor in the Labour Party, Peter Smith, put it forward for a motion. And so just, I know you all know this, maybe people at home who are watching it, you know, that's one of the fastest mass displacements in history, at least 90% forcibly displaced, 13,000 children, including more than 700 babies have been killed, many shot in the head and chest. And I think, obviously it goes on, and, you know, drive time, I don't know if anybody heard drive time, and Cormac and a surgeon that he was interviewing, and Cormac broke down in tears, and I think that's what we really need to see, and I think it's something that Irish people do. We have huge empathy. We are that nation that was occupied for 800 years. The Labour Party have been in a party for over 100 years, and many people mightn't realise that, and one of the first papers in front of the Dáil was Tom Johnson Democratic Programme, and we spoke about the rights of a nation to hold their own resources, and that's what we believe, the right of the Palestinians to hold their own resources. But with the Israeli expansion into all occupied territories, you know, even if you have a two-state solution, that's not really going to work, because now the Gazans and the West Bank people, they don't actually have any land left, and now there's just no viable land left. Nearly the whole of Gaza is just unoccupiable, and yeah, I really do feel that. I just can't believe how other people can't see it, just like you. But I think as an Irish nation, we understand it and we enact it, and we will enact it in Labour.
Thanks, Michelle. Owen.
Yeah, look, obviously I agree with all of the demands put forward by the IPSC, before Paddy have been putting forward these demands for a long time now. So we want a total, you know, isolation of the Israeli state. That's what we need. Total ban on, you know, on trade, sanctions. We need BDS, basically, boycott, definitely sanctions. We also need the US military out of Shannon, and we need the planes that have been carrying tons and tons of weapons through Irish airspace to be stopped from doing so, and to be sanctioned, basically. And the government has not. It can't answer whether it's giving permission for this to happen or not. This ammunition is being used to commit genocide, and it either is giving permission or it's allowing it to happen without, you know, permission being sought. And either way, they haven't tried to stop it. I just want to talk about the politics of why this is, because we obviously agree with the kind of those points raised obviously by the IPSC plus the stuff around the US military. Is because this government is, you know, Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael in particular, are completely acquiescent to US imperialism, and they do not want to challenge US imperialism. And so we, obviously back in March, we were trying to put pressure that they shouldn't go to meet Genocide Joe, and you know, I think, frankly, it's disappointing that Sinn Féin went across as well to meet with Genocide Joe. Just in terms of what we're going to do about it, I think we need to bring about the dismantling of the Israeli state. So that means a total boycott of the Israeli state. The two-state solution has been used as a fig leaf, basically, to provide cover for further ethnic cleansing. It's been steady, and now it's a full-on genocide, and now they're expanding into Lebanon as well. So. And by dismantling the Israeli state, we mean we want a single democratic state of Palestine with equal rights for everybody who lives there. That's the only just outcome, and at this point, really, the two-state solution is dead in the water. And just finally, in terms of what we're going to do about it, because it's easy just to talk about demands, I think the Irish people who've been on the streets, it's the movement really that is going to put pressure on the powers that be to actually take any kind of action here, and so that's something that we've been in the thick of. We've been trying to obviously build a protest, but also being involved in direct action. We have a history of this. Obviously, you know, people like Paul Murphy would have broken the blockade back in 2011 with the Gaza Freedom Flotilla, but obviously now more recently, our members have been involved in direct action, in building protests. The likes of Conor Reddy, who's standing in Dublin North West, played a key role in winning demands in Trinity, for example, in the encampment there. So, like, we need to not just be talking in the Dáil, we need to be building on the streets, and that's a fundamental part of People Before Profits politics, is actually that people power comes first, and we use the Dáil to try and organise and raise those demands and build that struggle rather than the other way around. Thanks.
Okay, thanks very much, and I think everybody has responded on that. Just to say, I should say that in fact I think all of the parties represented here this evening have actually signed up to the 5 pledges, isn't that right? And I might just name parties that have not signed. Fine Gael, Fianna Fáil and Aontú and the Greens didn't sign because they have caveats in relation to, I think, is it pledges 1 and 4 or something. Was that correct? Which I think is ridiculous, but that's a personal view, you understand, right? I'm sorry for the coughing. We now, do we have a second question? Yes, please.
Hi everyone, my name is Abdul, I'm Palestinian, and of course I'm inspired by the decades of solidarity from the Irish people to Palestine and Palestinians. We're very inspired by that. And thank you so much for outlining your positions and for sharing your promises. I think a lot of people are waiting to hear these from yourselves. Now, unfortunately, during the campaign, a lot of people say a lot of nice things, a lot of things that they would like to hear. And during the next couple of years, things might change in the way. We've seen that in 2020 with the occupied territories bill. There were a lot of promises that's going to pass. Until today, it hasn't been passed. We're nearly 2025 now. I think my question is very straightforward. Sorry about that. But just you're representing yourself. You're representing a promise, or you're representing a party in here. So we would like to know, what are the things that is red line for you? It's not going to happen. We're not going to compromise on this. And what are the things that you might compromise? I think a lot of people would like to know, what are the red lines that you have in case you move forward from here? So what are the red lines that you cannot compromise at all?
Do you mean if, for example, a party is going into government?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, sorry. Yeah. What are the red lines that you're not going to say? And what are the things that you might compromise in the next time?
Okay,
yeah,
compromise is not a word we like in relation to Palestine. But we take the point. I think, Owen, it's your turn to begin.
I mean, what I've outlined is a red line, we need the US military out of Shannon. This also ties in completely to the economic model that we have, based around, US, the same reason that the Irish government can't do anything on Palestine is the reason that we have vulture funds. It's acquiescence to American corporate power, and investment funds and so on. They're very much interlinked. So it's a red line to have the US military, and BDS is a red line for us as well. We need a total boycott of the Israeli state. Not the occupied territories bill is a step in the right direction, but it's only actually a boycott on goods from the occupied territories. It actually, it would be a historic thing in that it would be the first time the Irish government had actually done anything concrete. But in terms of the action that we need to isolate Israel on the world stage, we need a total boycott on Israel. And probably talk to him. Sorry,
I was just going to say, if everybody keeps your responses brief on this so we can have some time for questions then.
Yeah, well, we've signed up to the IPSC campaign, and I think we always have to encourage dialogue. We have to keep building peace. We want to keep the triple up here, the neutrality in Ireland as well. That's really important for us to have gravitas when we go on to an international stage. I know my father was a peacekeeper. I think Clare's dad was a peacekeeper, and actually my dad said today that I think he worked with your dad in Lebanon. So from a very young age, you could just personally, for me, Lebanon was always on the periphery. My dad went there in 1978. He was one of the first ones. He won the Distinguished Service Medal. those very few handful of people for murder in 1979 in Lebanon. So I'm so conscious that we really need to keep Palestine at the forefront of everything that we do going forward. And I really think with the ICJ issuing the arrest warrants for Benjamin Netanyahu and Gael, and that we are on the cusp of losing humanity. And this is what a lot of the lawyers are saying in the ICJ, like if we do not enact this and we do not recognise the genocide that's going on here, first of all, the Western democracy is just losing credibility. We're absolutely losing credibility. So we really need to stand firm in this and ensure that we keep to the basic humanitarian laws that, you know, came after World War II, where we said never again. And as a school teacher, I just want to say, I just find it really difficult where we teach still about the World War I and World War II in schools, where we say never again, and yet everything's happening, and especially in Britain where, you know, there's such hypocrites.
Paddy, Michelle, Janice.
Look, Mary Lou and Matt Carty has spoke really well on this issue at all times, and I've raised it again and again and again. I'll take Owen's point in relation to visiting Joe Biden. Look, I know there was people that weren't happy with that, but Michelle O'Neill and Mary Lou MacDonald brought the issue directly to them, and that's the point of the conversation. And I get that people are annoyed about that. I do. It's not something that I'm oblivious to, so I do get that. But look, we're a party that stands with Palestine, and we want to continue to do that. And anything that we can do in order to stand and show solidarity to Palestine, we will do, and we have done. And look, I read out the list of stuff that's already in the manifesto as well. It's just in relation to enacting the Occupied Territories Bill again. I'm not going to read it back out, but look. We want to support Palestinian people as much as we possibly can. Some people are saying we're not going far enough. I mean, I can't speak to that because I'm obviously here representing the party that I'm elected to represent. So, and I'm trying my best, to be perfectly honest with you. So I hope you appreciate that.
Yes, thank you, Janice.
Thanks.
Thank you. Like I suppose what's I've been a politician for all of 6 months at a local level, but in my interactions with politicians so far, what's amazed me is like cowardice and an unwillingness to take a stand. And I've seen it in education, but I never understand the idea of a career politician. My view of it is do it for 5 years, do it for 10 years, do it for what you believe in, fight hard for what you believe in, get it done, you know, whatever. But a career politician, I never quite understand that. It's the only reason I can think for the compromise and cowardice. For example, in the relation to the Occupied Territories Bill, I've seen it in education. We were promised a citizens' assembly on education. The last programme from government, that's supposed to be written in stone. And I saw them twist and squirm and do anything not to do that. So again, it's not the same level, but I'm just saying it's an eye-opener when you realise the lengths to which people will go to avoid doing what they promised to do. So, yeah.
Sure.
A short question as well. It is difficult, and I know that there are a lot of other things I'm interested in besides Palestine as well.
Yeah.
No, just very quickly. The thing that made me get involved in Palestine and come back to the 1970s was the media. These things were happening and it wasn't being reported or was skewed. Israel was defending itself. I know that Sinn Féin have mentioned it in their manifesto that they will try and ensure that there is kind of a fair media. Now, I'm just wondering with the rest of the parties that support that and how it's actually done. Should we have a media that supports international law, the various conventions, Genocide Convention, Geneva Conventions, and the ICJ ruling on international law as well and on Palestine as well? That's just
media, sorry, am I hearing you correctly? Media?
The media, and
Yeah.
I mean all media, all sections of media, because I think this is happening because it's never been reported. I was involved with the South African campaign, and I think when you saw on the media what was actually happening in South Africa, then you saw pressure on the government.
Okay, that's fine. I'm going to take another couple, and then we'll get the, next person there. Hand up just down there. Yeah. 2, 3 or 4, and then give them to you, okay?
So I work with a group that provides support to homeless asylum seekers. I think as an issue that really runs at the intersection of climate change, Palestine and housing. The past week there's been a bad cold snap, so emergency accommodation has been provided. Tomorrow the emergency accommodation ends and hundreds of people will be left to sleep on the street. I just want to know how you plan on providing support to asylum seekers, especially homeless asylum seekers in this country.
Okay, take one more there.
I'll just keep this very quick. It's a more, I suppose, again, I'm trying to make it intersectional. Ireland's, we still are very far behind. We're not making any effort really in changing our energy system from fossil fuels. We're now looking at frack gas coming into Ireland. We're coal, money point is still going strong down in County Clare. Coal coming from Colombia with the huge destruction of rainforests and mass exploitation of communities. We had a group over from Colombia looking at Smurfit. So I suppose what would be, and then when we do have renewable energy, we're bringing in German companies that used to be nuclear power and now pretend they care about renewable energy, BW something or other. So I'm just really curious to know what the panel's solution is, or if they want to talk about other environmental issues, but I think energy is the low-hanging fruit.
So energy basically and fracking?
Yeah, well, just what would the solution, like how are we going to move Ireland away from our imported fossil fuel dependency? And is the government, and then we just bring in a terrible German company that has a history of nuclear power as our solution to bring in renewables and all the gas pipeline, we still have that going strong. And yeah, I suppose, what's their solution for energy?
Okay, I'll take one more. I think there was somebody over there, wasn't there? Just, yeah. If it's a short question.
Short question, and it's more directed at Paddy and Michelle rather than the others, if that's okay. And my question would be, is why should we trust the parties you're in to do it different this time? Particularly when we're talking about housing. I would go back, I could give countless examples. I live in the Docklands, I saw the massive transfer of wealth with the Docklands Authority from public land into investors' hands. But going back a couple of years for Beverley Gardens, that was given away to private developers by Dublin City Council in a deal that was done which had the support of the Social Democrats and the Labour Party. And as Paddy said, you can't do it right locally, how can you do it right nationally? So what's different about your parties that we can trust you now?
Okay, thank you very much. I'm just going to take the last hand that was up here. That's yourself there. Oh, okay. If you keep them really, 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 really short.
Hi. I originally came along here to address the Palestinian issue, but I have to make one or two comments about the naive nature. I'm sorry, hold it. Sorry. Is it a question or comment? It's a question. As you know, most of the developers who developed the apartments over the years developed them at a very substandard level. And
sorry, I can't hear you very well.
It's going to cost between 2 billion and 7 billion to do the remediation works. Some of you sit on councils. The council has never checked the standard of the buildings that were constructed. And the bill is likely to go beyond 7 billion and probably as high as 9 or 10 billion. That's the first point. The second point is that recently, perhaps I think 6 or 9 months ago, the government decided that the Section 47 and Section 48 contributions would all be waived, about 250 million thrown away, and no big reaction from any of the political parties except to favour it. So, while I think that some of the answers I've heard here tonight are somewhat naive, the third point I want to make is that the councils do not have the staff or the expertise, and Beverley Gardens is a good example, to do the housing or carry out the projects that you have mentioned. So I would like you to address those points as to how you think some of those monies could be recovered, or what kind of a body you would set up to carry out the housing projects that you think are necessary, and the LDA are not set up for it.
Okay, thank you. So that's really local councils or alternative body that could carry out the remediation exercises. Fine. We have, that was the last question there, and the first one we started with was media and international law. The second one, the awful situation regarding emergency accommodation for homeless asylum seekers. followed by what kind of solutions would we see for the development of renewables here. And the next question then was addressed to Labour and Soc Dems. How would you do it differently if you had that opportunity this time round? And the final one then, which was effective, I don't think I've forgotten anything, which is effectively the question on remediation works. Can we trust the councils, or who do we need to carry out and oversee this work? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go round to each of you and say, look, choose one of those and respond, because nobody can respond to absolutely everything. I can see Paddy raising his eyebrow, I understand. But in the time available, that's really what we have, and I know you go into 2 minutes. So why don't you start, Clare?
Everybody has 2 minutes. No,
everybody has 2 minutes, but would you mind starting there?
No, not at all, and I'd love to answer them all, but I can't, so maybe I'll start with the last one. I mean, the problems in construction, and they're very, very real, and the cost of remediation is enormous, but it occurred at a time after when self-certification was introduced. It was when the local authorities were removed of the powers of clerical works that the problems began. So the local authorities have certainly been drained of their staff, but we need to make them fit for purpose again. They do the planning, they have the engineers. We need to just put the right people in there to do that. Media, Malcolm X said, the media are the most powerful organisation in the world. They have the ability to make you think the innocent are guilty and the guilty innocent. So on Palestine and all of the issues, media control is a huge problem. 725 million was it that the government gave to RTE? And we wonder why the coverage is the way it is. There's your answer. Homeless asylum seekers, it's devastating, and it was important that was featured in the media yesterday. It's about 2,900, as I said earlier, who are without any form of even decent temporary accommodation in this weather. I mean, I think there will have to be gestures of solidarity around that. We all need to keep the pressure on. I mean, many people over the years have opened up their homes and have had people staying with them and all of that, but we need to put the pressure on the state, and there's no need for that. There's plenty of buildings inside, nobody needs to be on the streets, and there's another one that alternative energy, wind and wave and all the rest, but yeah, we probably haven't time to go into that, but yeah.
Thanks very much. I am wary of being corralled into answering on O'Devany Gardens, given that there's other things to talk about, and I'm 6 months on the council, but I will, and that'll be the bulk of my answer. But in brief, what I'd say is, on the media, yeah, I'm extremely wary of privately controlled media as well. I think we need a proper public service remit and oversight of public service broadcasters, and I think we have that, but it needs, they need regulation and oversight, and that needs to be applied. But particularly, I think private ownership now is the particular area where needs attention and needs to be watched like a hawk, because let's face it, it's not Fox News and the American media is not controlled by public service broadcasting. It's not big public service broadcasting who's controlling the media. It's private interest there. So that I can't ignore the question of asylum seekers living on the street. I think it's disgusting. It's a disgusting reflection on Irish society, and it's a shame and a permanent mark in our society that that's been allowed to happen. And sorry, we do have policies for provision of proper accommodation for asylum seekers in our manifesto. And finally, on O'Devany Gardens, yeah, look, long before I was a councillor, what I would say is what I've learned about being a councillor is it's quite a weak role. You're essentially a lobbyist. You're lobbying a chief executive who's unelected. So that, as far as I can see, that's what a councillor is. That's what I've learned in the last few months. I'm there to lobby what is essentially a permanent government to do stuff. So what we need is directly elected mayor with executive powers. We have an executive Dublin City Council with fundraising powers. That's what we need, like other local authorities in other cities. And in that way we can address the issues that you raise.
Thanks, Paddy.
So just on the media question, we actually have a huge part in our manifesto in relation to the media and doing a peer review on RTE of the handling of the Palestinian people. So we have that in our manifesto. I'm not going to read it out, it's there, I can forward it on to you if you'd like. But just on the homeless thing, because it's a huge thing that affects me directly because of the council role that I'm in. I have people who are coming to me day in, day out, who are in homeless accommodation or rough sleeping and also in need of housing. So as I'm sure you are very much aware, we have set out in our alternative housing plan, a home of your own, that we can end long-term homelessness and the need to sleep rough by 2030. And in government, we would prioritise agreeing an ending homeless action plan with all of the homeless service providers within the first 3 months. I think that's a very reasonable thing to do because of the situation that people are faced in with homelessness and rough sleeping. We would ban no-fault evictions as well for 6 months. We would fund 6,500 tenant in situ purchases over 5 years. We would double the number of housing forced tenancies to 500 a year for single people in emergency accommodation, and double the number of social housing allocations for people who are experiencing homelessness. And we would also use emergency planning and procurement powers to deliver 10,000 age-friendly houses, because there's an awful lot of our senior cits who are ending up homeless through the private rental market as well. So that's our commitment, and it's all in our manifesto. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Janice. Yeah. Michelle.
Thanks. We don't necessarily agree with the Sinn Féin review on public service. We think public service broadcasting should be independent. People can and should complain to RTE directly and to come to Ceannabháin. That's what it's there for, but political parties in the government of the day shouldn't really be interfering in editorial. Sorry.
It's a peer review, it's not
okay.
Political party.
A good stop.
Yeah, so there are processes in place already for our public service broadcasting. The homeless asylum seekers, I feel really strongly about this because I really feel the government has just walked into the far right. It just walked into it by not implementing the reports that we had on homeless accommodation for asylum seekers, or for asylum seekers seeking international protection here in Ireland. If we had if we had done that, we wouldn't have the rise of the far right. We wouldn't be splitting communities. We wouldn't be using all our hotels. We would have had purpose-built accommodation that we knew was coming down the line. We knew climate change was going to push refugees into the global north. And the government knew this and they did not act on it, and that's a huge problem. Okay, thanks.
Thanks. Just very brief, Owen, I'm afraid.
Right, I'll just take two quick ones and just the question of the media. Obviously there's an issue with private media as well. Actually often, sometimes worse, you hear some of the kind of more right-wing stations and so on, where there's not the same kind of oversight. But in terms of RTE, actually we think this is a big issue. And it actually stems in part from a few things. There's the funding model for RTE, which is dependent on 50-50 advertising and then obviously public, which means that you have things like Renault, for example, advertising and getting, which is a climate issue in and of itself. So we want RTE to be fully. By the way, the government was kind of threatening to cut loads of just ordinary workers in RTE. As a kind of an opportunistic kind of strike against the public broadcaster and very cynical. So what we should be doing is actually cutting a lot of the higher level, like top earners in RTE, have a more democratic, more representative board, not cut those ordinary workers and so on. We do invest properly in public service broadcasting, which we did. We would fund with a tax on the big tech companies, basically, so a digital tax. And just finally, I just want to talk about a question of asylum seekers. I've been a member of Against Racism now for 8 or 9 years now, and we've been campaigning against direct provision, which has been a horrible system that successive governments have presided over, and now they've basically escalated this and are putting asylum seekers on the street on arrival, and it's disgusting, and it's partly done, I think, to distract from their own failures on housing, because they're now pointing to asylum seekers and saying that we have a capacity issue when we have 166,000 vacant properties. There have been 48,000 of them vacant for over 5 years. So nobody should be Irish or asylum seeker. Nobody should be on the streets. We should open up those vacant homes as an emergency measure now. But obviously in the long term, then it's about dealing with the housing crisis, which we've obviously talked about in depth there already. So thanks very much.
Thanks very much, Owen. And I just want to say thank you. Clare has to leave now, but I want to say a really very big thank you to everybody here and for the questions. And the biggest thank you, of course, obviously, to all those of you who have been busily answering them. All of them. Thank you, Janice, for coming along at the last minute. And I also just want to say to all of us, I suppose, that we know what we have to do on Friday.
Yeah.
We know the kind of politics that we need in an incoming government. And our job is to go out and vote for that government that will deliver the kind of country that actually pretty well everybody here around this table has been talking about, the kinds of values, the sorts of principles and the kinds of politics that we actually need. We know what to do. Go and tell your friends and go and tell your frenemies and go and tell everybody how we need to vote on Friday, because so much depends on it. I mean, all of the issues we talked about could have been at least 3 hours in themselves. I'm sorry we had to rush through them. There's no disrespect. They're all critical issues. And in fact, just, you know, the thought of over 2,000 people being pushed out onto the cold streets, it actually makes me weep that I live in a country that does this, and I am deeply ashamed of it. I'm deeply ashamed that we have not done more. We have not done all we could for people in Gaza and for Palestine's independence. And it enrages me that the 6th richest country in the world can't provide housing for its people. So let's go out and vote to have a better country. Thank you all.